An oft-heard quote in the past few years goes something like this: I didn't leave the left left me. And for many on both sides of the Atlantic, it's actually very unclear what the left even stands for anymore. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, the anti-capitalist economic preoccupations of the old left began to take a backseat to the new way of understanding oppression. The politics of redistribution were replaced by a politics of recognition, and with this transformation, modern identity politics was born. And what makes identity politics significant and a departure from earlier movements is the demand, not for the inclusion within the fold of universal humankind, nor is it for respect in spite of one's differences. Rather, what is demanded is respect for oneself as different. Democrats still cling to the idea that they represent the true interests of the working class and that blue-collar voters who supported the GOP have been tricked. However, in the last election cycle, the Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton was a technocrat who openly disdained a large percent of the population, unironically made up mostly of white middle-class voters, calling them deplorables. Clinton was the symbol of what the Democratic Party has become and what its core values consist of. For the DNC, identity politics trumps all others, and they believed it more important to elect the first female president by repositioning the party to represent the interests of a coalition of minorities, upper-class professionals, living in gated communities, of course, and powerful interests in Silicon Valley and Hollywood, than to convince working-class Americans that the Democrats were still their party. In the aftermath of Hillary Clinton's spectacular defeat, the party has fragmented, and the strongest voice in the Democratic Party isn't even a registered Democrat. Senator Bernie Sanders is a socialist and registered independent who was himself thrown under the bus by the DMC, as well as newcomer and corporate media favorite Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is also a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. The key takeaway is the abandonment of the middle and working classes for identity politics. Identity politics, favored for different reasons by academic and corporate interests alike, is now the central operating principle within which the parties on the left orbit. However, once identity politics gains momentum, it invariably subdivides, giving rise to ever-proliferating group identities demanding recognition. LGB becomes LGBTQ, becomes LGBTQRSTUVWXYZ. Other letters have been added to the acronym, and even the order has been rearranged at times as different identity groups battle in their oppression Olympics over which group is least privileged. For today's left, blindness to group identity is the ultimate sin. On the other side of the Atlantic in the United Kingdom, Jeremy Corbyn, a socialist who became the Labour Party leader by accident, no doubt imagines himself to be a champion of the working class. But this is a working class of his imagination rather than of the real world. He himself was brought up in a manor house and has spent his life working as an MP in a constituency that has never been touched by either industrialization or deindustrialization. What Mr. Corbyn is in fact presiding over is the transformation of the Labour Party from being one that champions the working and middle classes to a coalition of three main groups: ethnic minorities, particularly Muslims, public sector professionals, and radicalized millennials, most of them the university-educated children of the salaried middle class who can't get their feet on the property ladder. And just like in America, identity politics as well as oppression Olympic spiraling is at the center of the Labour Party. And of course, the British case is different from the American case, which is different from the German case, which is different from the Canadian case. But the left in virtually all countries in the Western world is unified by their utopian messianic complex that has taken on cosmopolitan globalism as their main tenets and worldview, and at all times emphasizes internationalism over national interests, group interests over shared interests, and in doing so have completely abandoned the role of representing the working and middle class voters. In the US, it was Democratic presidents who signed NAFTA and pushed for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Trade deals have their pros and cons, but the working class bore the brunt of the damage these deals caused. In both the US and the UK, the left champions mass, uncontrolled, and unrestrained immigration. But again, it is the working class, both in wage stagnation and in their neighborhoods, that have to deal with the consequences of these political positions. And because the modern left has ensconced itself in a shell of radical identity politics and shouts fascist and racist at anyone that disagrees with their narrow view of reality, things in countries around the West are changing. The political parties enjoying the most success and growth currently are those that espouse some combination of nationalism, populism, and economic protectionism. The old parties of the left have failed to grasp that this ideology appeals to the broad majority of the working and middle classes as well. The political tribalism of the left has gone from inclusion to division and never-ending purity spirals. Although inclusivity is presumably still the ultimate goal, at least in theory, in reality, the contemporary left is pointedly exclusionary. And all of this is coming at a time of titanic and seismic demographic transformation currently taking place in the hyper-diverse cities of the Western world. The working and middle classes, who are now starting to live with the effects that will completely transform their society in the near future, are looking for anyone that will speak to them and for them. Most are interested in safe streets, a stable economy, quality of life, and a future for their children. Things such as radicalized gender politics and pronouns, unrelenting and unending immigration, and the creation of an ever-dizzying array of phobias, ists, and isms concocted almost daily at this point, grievance politics, the professionally offended, and the transformation of language are not very compelling political positions to get behind for most people past the age of 25 or those with a job. The liberal elites and the left in general are in love with cosmopolitan globalism and despise nationalism of any kind, but offer nothing of real substance to most of those in the working and middle classes who lack wedge identity issues to get behind. The left's exclusionary identity politics are ironic in light of the left's ostensible demands for inclusivity, and thus more and more people are begrudgingly casting their lots with the only people that will actually advocate for their interests. And that is not the radical, maniacal, modern left. Thus, their frantic desire to import a new voting bloc to replace the ones they have left behind. Thanks for watching. If you liked this material, please consider subscribing. Also follow Black Pigeon on the usual social media. Till next time.